work. Anyway, enough of that. Hello, my name is Dan. I am doing a architectural rendering, as you can see by the title there, and I am doing it first in pen and ink, and then we'll be doing it in watercolor on top of that. All right, let me get all my devices up and rolling now. There we go. There we go. All right. Thank you for joining me again. Architectural rendering. Let me get my bearings again. Deepest apologies for that snafu. Thank you, one of my viewers a few minutes ago, for letting me know that you weren't getting any sound. That was critical for me to know, and I had no idea. I know I should have had my monitor on. I do have it on now. Be that as it may, thank you so much for letting me know. So I'll back up. It's hard for me to remember now what I've already told you and what I haven't, because I already did this one time. So this is the original illustration that I actually did a few days ago. The client here is a landscape designer, so he's not doing the house, he's doing all of the grounds around the house. And what my client does for me, he sends me a video on YouTube, which I watch on my phone. And this particular sketch I actually did in the car on last week while my wife was driving. We had a 2-hour drive. And I watch his video, and in the video he's walking around the property describing what he wants. And of course there's no 40-foot aerial view like this anywhere in the video, so I have to make this up. And yes, the rough sketch is actually pretty rigorous mental work. I really do have to think hard. And then after doing this, as you can see, all the notes, that's his feedback. We sat down together and talked about changes and modifications. And so now I'm doing what I hope will be the camera ready or finished artwork. And when I'm finished with it, I will scan it into my computer, tweak it in Photoshop, and what my client gets is the Photoshop digital version of the artwork. I'm using a Faber-Castell. Can you see that? Yeah, barely. Faber-Castell size number 0.1. And it's advertised as waterproof, and thankfully I have tested it, and these pens are actually waterproof. You have to watch out for that if you're an artist and you're buying pens, if you're going to be doing watercolor with them, because some of them say they're waterproof, but they're not quite. I don't really know how that works. I'm assuming there must be degrees of waterproofness. Is that a word? And so if you're ever going to get one of these felt tip, I have a whole jar of them over here, different brands, different size, different shapes. Years ago I would have done all of this work with a rapidograph pen. This is what rapidograph pens look like. Let me show you, and you refill them. Let me take this apart. So you refill this part with ink, and it's a mechanical, this one's probably dry. Yeah. I shouldn't allow them to dry, but I do. And then I have to clean them with denatured alcohol. Maybe this one works. Anyway, these are fine tools, and that one's empty. Good. And that's what I used to do. Now I do I still use those, but I do more of my work with these convenient, really felt tip marker. The downside of the felt tip marker is that they just dry up so quickly. They're used up really in a matter of hours. That's how they make money on them. They put very, very little ink in them so that you're continually having to buy more. And so that's just the price you pay if you want to use them. And that is the downside. Also, you have to watch out to make sure that they actually are waterproof, because sometimes they're not. I'm repeating myself, I know. Let me do something else for a while. This is going to be a dreadfully boring YouTube video. I'm not going to do anything to try to make it anything other than dreadfully boring. It's only not for the faint of heart. Probably mostly for my fellow artists who want to watch someone else suffer, watch someone else do some artwork, maybe learn a few things. I'll be glad to try to teach as I go. Now, the overall technique, let me back up here to this camera. The overall technique here that you see is me using a light table. I am a huge user, have been for decades and decades, a huge user of light tables. And for obvious reasons, I suppose. I don't need to explain, right? I guess I will explain a little bit. This was my original sketch, again, with notes from my client of changes, many changes, very typical, very typical. And then I scanned this into my computer, tweaked a few things, moved things around, printed it out, and that's what's taped to the back of this paper that I'm drawing on, is the printout from my computer. Most of the hard work in an illustration like this is the rough sketch. This is the hard work. The final artwork, just takes patience. That's all. It just takes time. You just have to sit on your butt at your drawing table or light table, as the case may be, and just draw and draw and draw and draw. And before you know it, 2.5 or 3 hours later, you're finished. That's all there is to it. My client is as I said, is a landscape architect. He does excellent work. If you want to look him up, it's here in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's called Little Squirrels, is the name of his company. He's been in the business for many years. He is quite the lumberjack, literally. His favorite part of it, he's 50 years old. He still says the favorite part of his job is climbing trees, which is pretty something. And he does an excellent job, has an excellent business going on, and he's pretty much the only one for the last couple years that I have been doing architectural renderings for. I used to do, as you can see by, if you read my description there, I used to do a lot of architectural rendering, especially back before the big bank corruption, the big that too, the big bank collapse in 2007, 2008. I did a lot of architecture rendering. Then it all dried up. Fortunately, at that point, I was already well on my way into my fine art career. So again, this kind of thing used to be my bread and butter. One of my bread and butters, but now it's almost an oddity for me, except for this one client, my Little Squirrels client. Except for him, I have virtually no architectural rendering. So I'll point out a few things as I proceed. Some you'll just notice intuitively. One of the decisions I need to make at the beginning of every architecture rendering job, is this going to be a ruler job or a freehand job? And even though you saw me use a ruler a little bit, this is a freehand job, which means I am allowing my lines to be artsy. Really, I guess that'd be the... Oh, a sneeze coming on. Hang on, folks. Let me see if I can stop this. Stop my sneeze. Maybe. Anyway, so this is not a ruler job. This is a freehand job, which means that all these lines are a little bit more artsy, expressive, expressive in quotes. I'm not trying to express myself here, but they're more playful, more loose, and not quite as perfect. Usually, I have to decide at the beginning if it's going to be one way or the other, because usually you don't mix the two, although, as I just told you, I actually have mixed them a little bit already on this drawing. Next time I use a ruler, I'll show you one of the tricks I have. Well, I'll do that right now. Okay, so grabbing a ruler, I'm going to draw this long line right here, and I want it to be straight. But rather than just going zip, I'm going to go like this. That was a little more freehand than I wanted. There we go. So now I get a straight line. In other words, it is straight, but it's got wiggles in it, so it looks more, it fits more with the rest of the drawing that is hand drawn. Same thing there. That make sense? Yeah, I'm sure it does. So that's how to use a ruler to do lines that match the hand-drawn lines. And again, this particular job has nothing to do with the house. So everything that I'm doing here with the house is really just window dressing, cosmetic. The client does not need to see a drawing of his or her house. The client just needs to see the landscaping. But of course, it would be kind of odd to do a landscape rendering without including the house. So I include the house. I just don't worry too much about it, whether it's perfectly. Let me see if I have a note about what kind of plants here. I'm looking at this. No. Low-growing stuff. He said low-growing stuff in here. So not grass. And he mentioned ferns. So, which at this distance would be mostly just triangles with a little bit of striations, a little bit of marks, but pretty hard to indicate ferns at this level. As I said earlier, when I'm finished with the artwork here, I'll be doing watercolor, and I already have my watercolors already here at my left hand ready to go. Okay, I'm going to do some art lines. In other words, these lines that I'm doing right now do not indicate any literal thing other than perhaps shadows. But one of the ways that you indicate depth in a landscape, this is essentially a landscape, right? One of the ways you indicate depth is by incorporating horizontal lines. It gives the feeling that the land that we're looking at there is going back away from the viewer. So that's what these lines, and I will reinforce them and make them into shadows, really. I will reinforce those lines in watercolor. Oh, and after the watercolor, I am going to use opaque watercolor, which is also known as gouache. So that's what's ahead for this job. First watercolor, then gouache, And then typically after the gouache, which is an opaque watercolor, and if you stick around long enough, you'll be able to watch me do all of that. Hello, 4 of you watching. I would love for you to say hi to me and let me know who you are and where you're from. That'd be kind of fun. A little bit about myself, because perhaps you don't know me. My name is Dan, and I live in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have been an artist pretty literally my whole life. My dad was a good painter, and so I remember as I marched into school on the first day at age 4.5 or 5. Let me see, I was 5. I remember swaggering into the school thinking, I'm an artist. Isn't that funny? Of course, at this point, all I'm remembering is the remembering. I don't really remember that event. People tell us that we don't remember those old events. We just remember what we remembered, the memories we have. And never mind. Never mind. It gets complicated. I don't need to get into it. Hang on just a second. I have pictures. So again, my client sent me, his name is Travis, and in here I have, in my phone, an album called Travis Jobs. There we go. And in this, I have pictures that I took from the video that he sent me. Again, he sends me a video and of him walking around talking about what plants go where and what brick wall goes where and all that kind of stuff. And then of course I freeze frame his video and do screenshots. That gives me pictures of the house in this case. So that helps me to get a little bit of accuracy. Again, even though accuracy on the house is not a major concern. They're not paying this man to do anything to their house. Let me see if there's a better angle. Close enough, I guess. Well, wait, let me look at this. Ooh, a little bit more of a fancy front door here. Let me change that just a little bit. Yeah, very nice. I was introducing myself. My name's Dan. I'm an artist. I've been an artist my whole life. I've been making money. I've been a professional artist, I guess you would say, since I was 18 years old. When I went off to college, my freshman year of college, I went to work for the college basically in their marketing department. I went to work for them as a graphic designer and illustrator. So that was 53 years ago. So I've literally been a professional artist for over 53 years. That's crazy, huh? Time flies. I just realized I started doing herringbone pattern here on this sidewalk. And I remembered this sidewalk is herringbone, but this sidewalk is not. So it's square laid. I just have to hint at that. I don't really have to. It's so small you can't see much, of course. It's what I would call a tweed or a weave pattern. 2 bricks go one way, then the 2 bricks right next to them go the other way. And of course that's pretty small details for this far away. As you may see if you're on my channel, or you may know if you've been here before, for several years I did something I called Daily Art Adventure, and I did over 1,000 live videos. A little bit why it's surprising what happened to me an hour ago when I was doing a broadcast and then discovered I had no sound. And after trying this and little that, it turns out I uninstalled the app and reinstalled it, and now we are working. So I appreciate somebody yelling at me very nicely a while ago and say no sound. Oh, that's embarrassing. That is embarrassing. Anyway, I've done a lot of broadcasts, and most of those I call Daily Art Adventure. And really what I'm doing right here today is very much more in keeping with what I did during my Daily Art Adventure. Now, people always ask, when I introduce myself or when I get introduced as an artist, people always say, what kind of artwork do you do? Sometimes I'm a smart aleck, and I say, especially if they say, what kind of painting do you do? I say, beautiful. And very often they'll say, oh, well, I knew that. And of course, if they say that, then I know that they really don't know much about art, because most of what is popular, certainly in the academy, in the university these days, is most certainly not beautiful. Not beautiful artwork is not in vogue, is not what's cool, not what's in style these days. But the other answer to the question, what kind of artwork do you do? And the answer, it's hard to answer because, frankly, I do almost a little bit of everything. And if you snoop around on my channel, maybe you've already done that, you have possibly seen that. One of the things I've done quite a bit of lately is calligraphy, going back to something that I've done much more of in years past. And I've been doing that again, and it's been a lot of fun. I call it, and that's on my other channel. So if some of you old timers wonder, well, where have you been? The answer is I've been mostly on my other channel. Why do I have an other channel? The reason is because on this channel I am Dan the Art Man. This is my art channel, and surprise, surprise, turns out I'm a lot more than an artist. I'm also a pretty serious musician and a writer. And my other channel, which is Dan Nelson, Big Picture, I hope you'll go there. I hope you'll check it out. I hope you'll listen, hope you'll like, hope you subscribe. I'm reading one of my books. I'm in the process of publishing several books at the moment. And one of them I'm publishing by reading out loud on my YouTube channel. So again, that's called Dan Nelson, Big Picture. And I do hope that you'll check it out over there. Appreciate it. Whew. Well, I am fulfilling my prophecy here of this is going to be a dreadfully boring video. I have miles to go. Maybe this might be a good time to talk a little bit more about drawing lines. I talk about this quite a bit, not only in illustration like this and using pen and ink, but even more so, or just as much, perhaps I should say, in my fine arts, in my oil painting. Oh, I know, that's where I was going. I do all kinds of work. Most of my work in the last 20 years has been oil painting. So what I'm doing right now is very much a sideline for my career, but it's for a friend and it helps pay the bills. So both of those are good things. So back to a line. Let me find a piece of scrap paper here. And let me talk about making lines for just a second. Little sidebar to talk about lines. Here's how most people hold their pen, right? And if they want a straight line, they go like that, or they go like that. Those might be okay, but they're usually not very good. The reason they're not very good is because the viewer gets the feeling that the artist tried to draw a straight line, and clearly I, the artist, failed. Let me draw right next to that a straight line using a ruler so that it will accentuate. Look at how non-straight this line is. Okay? So if the viewer gets the impression, I'll do one at an angle, gets the impression that the artist tried to draw a straight line but failed, you'll bear with, that's pretty straight, but it, except for right there, that creates an uncomfortable tension in the mind of the viewer. So an artist usually should not draw straight lines in that manner. I'll do another one at an angle. And by the way, I'm going to switch to a better grip, and I'm going to draw a straight line that's better. Now, what's better about that? Number one, it's clearly not straight, but more importantly, it clearly, the artist, me in this case, clearly did not try to make it straight. So when the viewer looks at this, they go, ooh, the artist did that on purpose. Now let me compare that to a ruler. Let's see how straight it is. My ruler has I use this to cut with, so it's got some notch. Okay, so overall it's a straight line, just like these were. But unlike these lines that are crooked and uncomfortable, this line is crooked and comfortable. Does that make sense? And let's do another one over here. So again, a good crooked line. No, a good straight line, I should say. Again, let's compare that to the line I make with a ruler. Overall, this line is pretty straight. It's not perfect. None of the hand-drawn lines are straight. But again, this line gives the viewer the impression that I made it crooked on purpose, which of course I did. So I get the benefit of a quote-unquote straight line, because you see it's overall straight. I get the benefit of a crooked line, straight line, without the downside of the viewer feeling like, you tried to make it straight and failed. All right, so that's a quick lesson about how to draw straight lines without a ruler. And you'll discover that on a smaller scale, I am employing that technique a great deal in this rendering. Now, let me just a little bit more about how a landscape illustrator might work. I'm on my phone. Curly leaf ligustrum images. There we go. So I want to see what a curly leaf ligustrum looks like. I should have said curly leaf ligustrum bushes, because I don't want to see leaves up close. I want to see the bushes and images. All right, there we go. There we go, there we go, there we go. Because my client said curly leaf ligustrum, and I happen to know why he said that. He said in my notes, in his notes here, he said 3 curly leaf ligustrums on each side of the porch. I happen to know what a curly, I had to look it up just to make sure I was getting it right, the visuals right. But because in fact this same man did landscaping in our front yard, and he planted one of these exact same kind of bush in our front yard. And of course, I don't get any. All I want to get is the shape of the bush. I'm not trying to get the curly leaves. The cool part about these particular shrubs is that they don't grow. They don't get big. Isn't that amazing? They just basically, he did our front yard, oh, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago. And pretty much all the plants that he planted in our front yard are still almost exactly the same size as they were 8 years ago. And you might say, well, what's the good of that? Well, the good of that is And in this part of the country, North Carolina, plants grow so fast, shrubberies grow so fast that your most important tool as a homeowner is a pruning shears. You have to get out there and cut plants back, or they just absolutely take over. And so having a landscape designer who knows what he's doing is a great advantage, because you don't have to mess around with trimming the bushes every year. So, but the main point I wanted you to see is, again, just to give you an insight, just for fun, if you're interested, I don't know why you would be, but if you're interested in how does a landscape designer work, well, that's part of it. My client tells me what kind of plant he wants to put here, there, or whatever, and my job is to look it up online, like you just saw me do, and render the appropriate plant. Just a rough approximation, of course, because it's a very small illustration. Those plants are pretty far away, but he said 3 of them, so that's the important part, that I do 3, because he'll be communicating that to his client, and he'll say, and here we thought we'd put 3 curly leaf ligustrums because they won't grow on you, and you don't have to constantly be trimming them. So I imagine that's what he will say to his client, his customer. So I'm getting close to being finished with the pen and ink rendering. Just a little bit back here, and then I will proceed to the watercolor, which is maybe a little bit more interesting. Again, I'm not really going to do anything to try to make this broadcast more interesting. This is only not for the faint of heart, as I said, only for probably mostly my fellow artists who may either like to see someone else suffer the way they do, or perhaps pick up a few tips. I know that some of my artist friends over the years have said, "Oh, no, I don't watch you. I just put your video on in the background and continue my own work." To which I say a hearty amen. That's very smart of you, in my opinion. If I were you, I wouldn't watch me either. I hope I'm getting this part right back here. I think there's bushes in front of... There's a gate way back here that goes into the backyard, and I'm going to just leave that quite abstract. Now I feel like I really should do some trees up here in the background. Yeah. Okay, so these I talked about this a while ago when it turns out we weren't having any sound. So if you're an artist and you wonder how you can draw better trees in pen and ink, foliage, trees or bushes, let's take a minute to talk about that. First of all, I would like you to notice how I am holding the pen, right? I'm holding it what I call side saddle. I put it between, it can go, anything like this is good. That's good. That's kind of weird. That's good. That's good. I do this sometimes through my pinky. Just then I had it through my, between my 2 middle fingers. And as you saw, I just drew that line representing the top of trees, going mostly from left to right. What I'm going to do next is quite important. Again, drawing intentionally very crooked lines. The key thing is now I'm going in the opposite direction, more or less tracing the same shapes that I did the first time, going inside, outside, trying to create a random line, the way nature grows, but I'm going from right to left, and that is critically important, if you want to try to create randomness. It turns out the human beast, the human animal, has a very hard time creating. Now I'm switching grip now, by the way, to do some details. Human beings, with their hands, artists, have a very hard time creating randomness. So one of the ways to get over that is I go both directions, left and right. Now that doesn't guarantee, but it gets me a lot closer to a truly random pattern than if I just went one way or the other. Then the next thing I do is what you see me doing now. This is a technique I've used for decades and decades. I use it even in my cartooning when it's appropriate. Now I'm doing dots, as if little leaves have escaped from the main body of the plant and are sticking up, the way they do, sticking up above the boundary of the foliage. And I'm doing little dots, dots and circles, dots and circles, dots and circles, inside and outside. And when I finish this, I'm just about done. You will see that it has somewhat the appearance of a tree line. So if you want to use that trick, by all means, pick it up. Go one direction, come back, go the other direction, and then do dots and circles. Let me let you see that a little bit up close. There you go. All right. Now, I'm going to do one more thing, and that is in trees in particular. Go back to my other grip. There tend to be holes in trees, right, in the foliage, and they tend to be not at the edge of a tree, but in the middle. So I just drew, and in those holes, let me not interrupt myself, hang on. In those holes, you can see tree trunks or large limbs and branches. So I'll draw the hole here first, and again, I go around one way and then go around the other way, and then in there, draw some indication of branches. Let me do one over here. And I've done this so much, I tend to draw the branches and the holes at the same time. I don't typically draw the hole and then the branch. It just all happens all at once. Let me see, just a few other little indications of branches, again, because I'm trying to make this whole area look like a tree line. I'm sure that makes sense to you. Now down here, I can just do some, I am quite sure that there's actually neighbors. I'm sure there's a house here and a house here, but I'm also quite sure that there are trees in and around this house. This is the way the landscape looks in North Carolina. Anyway, there are a lot of trees here, and an established neighborhood. This house is obviously in an established old part of town, and it would be just filled with trees and bushes. All right, good enough. Let me take a look at that, see if there's anything else I want to do. Indicate boards back here. This is a white fence. Yeah, I'm going to do a little bit of indication of shingles here. I haven't given much thought yet to which way the light is coming from. Obviously, I'm drawing just the outline at the moment, so light has not been a major concern. But if I do bricks on this side of the chimney and shingles on this side of the roof, then clearly my light is coming from the upper right. So I have just determined that. I am not going to do shingles here, at least not in pen and ink, at least not yet. I might come back and change my mind. But I've done lines here, which almost acts a little bit like shading. All right. Oh, let's do some of that. Let's do some shingles down here for sure. I want a few dots along the edge of the road just to give it a little bit of grit and look like it's, a real street. Oh, and while I'm at it, I'm going to sign this. I tell this client that I don't need to sign an illustration like this. It's not like I'm particularly proud of it. I'm not signing the signing the painting because I'm proud. It's actually a little bit of marketing, not for me, but for my client, so that when my client shows this painting to his client, the customer, the customer will say, "Ooh, this is not some like AI, Photoshop rendered thing. This is a real artist did this." So I am buying my client a little bit of razzmatazz, a little bit of show off. Does that make sense? Because I want the client. I think in this case, sometimes I do jobs like this, and the job is a done deal. Well, we already know what's going to happen. I believe in this case that is not the case. If I understood my client the other day, he's pitching this job. He hopes to get this job from the client, so that my illustration is actually part of the sales pitch. There you go. Does that make sense? So since my illustration is part of the sales pitch, I'm adding just a little bit of razzmatazz by signing. If you're not from America and you don't speak English, you might not know what razzmatazz is. It's not a real word. It's just one of those. I'm adding just a little bit of fanciness to add credibility to my client again, so that the customer looks at it and says, "Wow, this guy hired a real illustrator to do." Now that I've done that, I feel like the need to do a little bit of the other edge of the street down here. Yeah, that's nice. And you saw how I was using the ruler a while ago. I didn't draw straight lines. I drew slightly crooked lines on purpose. All right. Woohoo! Is anybody watching? Yeah, 2 people. Tell you what, if you're watching, give me a howdy, give me a wave, give me let me know your name or something, just for fun, if you want to. All right, let me move this camera, and I'll let you watch me get my paints ready. This is a watercolor tray. It was originally made by Grumbacher. A set. I never opened it. Oh yeah, look at there. I've got gouache on the inside. I forgot that. Yeah, Grumbacher. I bought this in 1972. I find that amusing. 1972. This thing is 53 years old. 53 years ago, I bought this tray. I mean, I have several others. I have several bigger ones in my storage attic right over here to my left. But it's just kind of funny. I was a watercolor major in college, and this is one I used. Oh, what you see underneath here is my gouache, and gouache is opaque watercolor. And I'll be using that in a few minutes on top of this watercolor. All right, now let's go back to a straight down view, because I want to show you. Here's a universal rule of artistry. Always use the biggest brush you can get away with. So this is a 3-inch brush. Is that right? Yep. And this is what I'm going to start with. Again, here is the size of the illustration. I just want to point something out here, because I know good and well most of my early journey painters, they have to paint this painting. This is the last thing in the world. This is the last thing in the world they would think of using. So I'm here for. I'm here to give you instruction. All right, back over here to my water. Here's my jar of almost clean water. I used it a little bit yesterday, so it's not completely clean, but it's close enough. And I'm going to mix up right now in the large wells here. I'm mixing up a blue-green with a little bit of brown in it, a little bit of brown orange in it, so it's not too bright and not too dark. I'm going to have a tissue ready to go in my hand, and here we go. I have done this before. So this might look really scary to you if you're an artist or a watercolor painter. And I don't always do this, by the way. But I have discovered for this particular client, my friend over there, Little Squirrels Incorporated, my renderings for him, which are medium, I would call them medium messy, or blunt, or not too detailed, right? The style here is not terribly realistic. It's a slightly abstract or expressionist looking technique, right? My pen and ink lines that I talked about earlier, a lot of them are wiggly and squiggly, scribbly, not perfect. I do have done many renderings that are super precise. I've done the kind of rendering where I draw and paint every stinking brick in the wall. And if that's what the client wants, I think I'm done with that brush. If that's what the client wants, then that's what I give the client. Now what I'm doing right now is really an important part of this technique. And it also begins to make sense of the technique. Because some of you are going, what in the world? What are you doing? So now I'm with a clean tissue, Kleenex. In America, most of us call this a Kleenex. If you want to be technical, you're not supposed to use a brand name. So we call it a tissue. Oh, forget that. I'm using Kleenexes. And I'm lifting out some of the watercolor I just put down. So there you go. I'm halfway finished. Let me switch cameras. Sorry about that. I should have had that camera on for that little bit. So maybe you can see why I use that particular technique. It is not a classic watercolor technique. This is a classic illustrator's, in my opinion, illustrator technique. Now, hang on just for a minute. I'm going to make some bad noise by picking up a hairdryer and drying this. Whew. Lovely sound, eh? All right, that is partly to just get some of the curl out of the paper. There we go. Here's a trick, by the way. If you want to, this is drawing paper. It's not watercolor paper. It's not copy machine paper. Although I've done, believe me, I've done plenty of this kind of rendering on nothing other than plain old 8.5 by 11 copy machine paper. This happens to be out of a pad of drawing paper, so it's just a little bit heavier than copy paper, and has a little bit more tooth, just a little bit more friendly to work with. And again, I use the dryer mostly to get curl out of it. I was going to tell you a trick. I didn't do it this time, but if you put masking tape, painter's tape, the good blue stuff now, crisscross, go around the edge and make a plus and an X on the back, it will take a lot of the curl out of your paper and makes it easier to work with. All right, now the question is, where to start now? And I'm certainly not going to be using a 3-inch brush. As you can maybe tell, I don't always start in the same place with my rendering. Everyone's a little bit different. I have a general procedure, but not extremely specific. So I just decided while I was scratching my chin that today I'm going to next step, I am going to do these trees up here in the background. I just feel like that will help establish the overall tone of the painting. Overall value tone, I mean. And you will notice I'm using a 1-inch brush, which once again is probably a bigger brush. If you're an early journey painter, watercolor painter, that's probably not the size you would have chosen, but maybe you will. Maybe you would have. My point being, it's probably larger than what most people would expect, again, for a painting this size. The general rule is, and this is not a Dan Nelson rule, this is not a Dan Nelson, this is not a Nelsonism, this is a universal college art professor rule. In other words, standard wisdom. Always use the biggest brush you can get away with. Always use the largest brush for whatever it is you're doing. Try to use a brush. And if you're a beginner, or if you're an early journey, as I like to call you, if you're an early journey painter, that means push yourself a little to be uncomfortable. Resist the temptation to go for that tiny brush that you're more comfortable with. I just added a little bit of yellow to this same green color so that I have some variety in this backdrop of foliage. Again, the client, I'm quite sure, is really not going to be paying any attention to these trees and bushes behind his house. But how I treat the trees and bushes will impact his feelings when he looks. He'll be looking at the landscape, but how I do the background will impact his overall impression. So I want to create a good impression, even though in his mind he won't hopefully be paying, if he's a typical person, he won't be paying any attention to all this stuff back here. All right. Having done that, I think the next thing I'm going to do is going to a 1/2-inch brush now. I'm going to continue in this sort of broad stroke green stuff, and I'm going to do the green grass, the lawn. There's a fair amount of that. You could say that the strategy that I'm employing at the moment in painting this little illustration is I'm doing large areas first. And that is fairly standard practice. Again, it's not unique to me. That's not unusual. That's fairly standard way to operate. Do the big shapes first, and then work your way down and down and down and down to smaller and smaller and smaller. And again, what I'm doing with this illustration, I do not by any means call it a formal watercolor painting. It's an illustration employing watercolor. Pen and ink and watercolor. And that means that I am keenly aware in the back of my mind. I know that I'm going to be using gouache or opaque watercolor paint on top of this watercolor. So I will be doing some of my final tweaking. Unlike if this was a real watercolor, so to speak, quote unquote, real watercolor painting, I would be alarmed because I can't make anything lighter. Like watercolor, generally speaking, as a medium, once you've made a part of the paper dark, you're done. You can't go back to making it light. Of course, there are exceptions to that, but generally, I'm not going to use those exceptions here. I'm just going to use gouache. All right, I think that might be all the grass that there is, except I'm going to invent some grass here representing the client's backyard, which really does not, I didn't see any pictures of it. From the video that I saw, I have a feeling that the back of the house is quite tree bound. A lot of overhead foliage there in the backyard, so I'm not going to get into any detail at all if I can help it. All right, I've got the green. I think I'm going to continue this trajectory of large areas first, going back to my 1-inch brush. Oh, some of you might enjoy getting a kick out of, might get a kick out of this a little bit. So this is my tray. Get you a better view. All right, and I want to make up a pretty much a flat gray colored paint. And this is green, so how do I make it gray? Easy. At least one step is add red to it, right? Because red and green are complementary colors. And now I should have something, if I get the ratios right, which I'm not going to fuss over very much, something resembling a brown. But I said I want gray, not brown. Right. So now, whoops, I just picked up too much, I know. So now I pick up blue. And I'm doing this so that I don't have to waste paint. Like I didn't have to, pick up a tissue and clean up that well. There we go. That's pretty good. That's great. So complementary color to get it neutral, and then blue to make it more of a gray. And I'm going to use this color to indicate, again, I don't want to draw much attention to the street. This is not the important part of the painting, the street. But I could just leave it light, but I decided not to do that. I thought about it a little bit, and so I'm going to now actually, I want a bigger brush for this street. So there you go. I'm using a 2-inch brush now because I want to be able to lay this down really quickly so that I don't get a lot of texture down here. I don't want a lot of energy. I do not want a lot of attention going to this part of the painting. I just want it to be there. That's part of the reason I picked, of course, gray, and of course asphalt. The streets are probably gray, so that helps. But even if the streets weren't gray, I may paint them that way anyway, simply because gray is such a neutral color. Okay, back to the 1-inch brush. While I have some gray mixed up, let's go ahead and do the gray side of the house and the roof. So sometimes in watercolor, you paint the details and then paint the shadows after the details. But in watercolor, you can, as I'm doing right here, you can actually do the shadow first, and then I'll come back later and do the details. And I've got several things going on in my head. One is that the windows on this side of the house are going to be reflecting, since this is the dark side of the house, the windows here are going to be light colored because they're going to be reflecting what's happening over here. So I'll come back later with a damp brush and you'll see me lift color. Again, that's standard, traditional watercolor technique. That's nothing special. That's universal. Watercolor technique. And I'm going to do the same thing with the wall here. So even though, and what I'm doing here is very, very standard, typical architectural rendering. Even though this is a fairly loose or abstract painting, the indication of sunlight and shadow really goes a long way to giving an impression of realism. By the way, I want to point out something very specific to you right now. The last mark that I just made was the shadow of this railing on the face of this wall. Same thing there. Those are both at the same angle, and that shadow will also show up maybe a few other places, but those are the main places where those shadows will show up. I'm trying to decide whether, yeah, I guess I'll make the front of this wall shaded. Now I'm getting down to pretty small details, with one exception. While I've got this nice flat brush in my hand, I'm going to do the shadow under the eave. A little bit dark. All right. And I'm going to do the roof, the shady side of the roof. Now I probably will come back. Maybe I'll do it right now. I was going to say I'll do the sunny side of the roof with a lighter gray. Yeah, I'll probably do that right now. Again, just following the general rule, if you will, of doing large shapes first. Sort of get them out of the way. Oops, I don't want that much energy there. I don't like that. Changed my mind there. Shadow of this chimney, shadow on the chimney, and then shadow of the chimney, something like that. I don't really know where that would go. Shadow of this big tree right there, shadow of this tree right there. Then all the bushes have shadows, but I'll probably do most of that later with a smaller brush. Just really quickly there, indicating that. Oh, now I do need to go to a smaller brush. This is smaller than I want, but I'm grabbing it fast and doing this roof over here. Oh yeah, more shadow on the ground, the shadow of... Okay, now I'm going to add some blue to this gray. Well, I've got this small brush in my hand, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the windows on this side of the house. So this is the light side of the house, the side that the sun is hitting, right? And on this side of the house, Whoops, hang on, I need to see a picture. On the light side of the house, the windows appear dark, at least in a simple painting. Okay, I'm looking, as you can see here, to see if there's a picture. That may be as close as I'm going to get. Okay, yep. I think this is another door there. So that's also glass. So also gets this bluish gray. Now the mullions, that's the name for the little boards that are in the middle of a window, right? You know that term probably, mullion. If this was a formal or realistic watercolor, I would leave those white. But because this is not a formal watercolor painting, I am going to do those mullions with either a whiteout pen or with gouache later on. So the mullions will be light, but I'll do that. I'll do it the easy way, the cheater method, if you will. I'm still doing, now I'm doing, with this small brush, I'm doing the shady side of many of these bushes. Again, really quick work. I'm not going to try to get too fussy on that. One of the things that will make these bushes, all these little bushes on the ground, one of the things that will make them, define them, will be, I've done this before, will be when I come back with an orangish brown paint and paint the ground cover around. In this part of the country, we call it mulch. I know some other parts of the country do too, but they have other names for it in other places. The shady side of this tree. Again, I'm using a dark green right now to do the shady side of the bushes. I'll do the lighter side of the bushes with a brighter green in a little bit. Okay, I've got a little problem I'm going to fix. There's too much energy, too much detail on this shady side of this roof. So I'm going to re-dampen that whole area with a flat brush. And that might take care of it, just like that. Just smeared around. Yeah, that's all. That'll take care of it. And now that I've got a very light colored gray on my brush, I'll use it to do the sunny side of the roof, because I'm assuming we want to indicate a gray roof. But we don't want a white. We do not want it white. Okay, what's the next largest area? I think I know what it is. I think it's the mulch. So I'm going to pick up, that's reddish brown. I want it a little bit more yellow than that, so I'm adding a fair amount of yellow. Is that too bright? I'd rather have it too bright than too dull. Let me try just a little bit of it somewhere here. Whoops! I just had paint on my finger, and I'll clean that up later. Let's do a little bit right here and see if I like this color. Nah, that is a little bit too bright. So let me pick up a dirty brush here and add some blue gray to that color. There, maybe that's okay. Let's try. I don't mind that little bit there. I'll leave it there, but let's try a little bit more here. It's a dark brown. It works very well. Yeah, it works well if I blot it up shortly after I put it down. It'll work well enough. So this color represents the mulch, which is either tree bark or, in our part of the country, or ground up branches, trees, or it is often pine straw. That was new to me. I grew up mostly in Michigan, spent nearly a decade in Texas, so I've lived in, well, 4 states altogether, but those are the main ones. And when my wife and I moved to North Carolina 36 years ago, I discovered that they called this pine straw. Where I had lived before, we called it pine needles. And again, it's a very popular ground cover, partly, obviously, because in North Carolina we have these big, beautiful yellow and loblolly and longleaf pine trees, all of which produce beautiful brown pine needles. And they actually, in this part of the country, somebody goes out and harvests them under a big stand. Wherever there's a big stand of pine trees, they actually, so do you see the color I'm using there? It's a little bit dull, but I think it works for some reason. And if I really don't like it, if I like it brighter, I'll either do something on top of it, or I may even just tweak it in Photoshop. In Photoshop, I could go in there, reach in there with my select tool or whatever, select the color and just make it shift it a little bit. Technology is a wonderful tool when it works. Right? Anyway, so in this part of the country, they bind pine needles into bales, just like hay bales, straw bales, same size, and sell them at the garden centers and Home Depot and Lowe's and things like that for ground cover. And I am not aware of that being done. I'm sure it's a lot of states, but there's a lot of states where that is not done, I'll say that. Anyway, so that's, and I have no idea what they're going to use for ground cover here. Not my job. Probably most of the time they use pine bark, ground up pine bark, which is brown, nice brown, and keeps weeds and other things down, but it has to be replaced every year if you want it. Same thing with the pine straw. If you want it to look good, you have to replace it every single year, so it's quite a bit of work. There are other more high-tech options, of course, that people have invented for accomplishing the same thing. Anyway, all that I mumble while I am deciding what color to make it. Nondescript brown. Could be mulch, could be pine bark, could be pine straw. Good enough. So we're getting there, you see? All right, definitely the next color I'm going to do, and I'm going to clean up this well a little bit. The next color is the color of the bricks. We have two kinds of bricks, at least in this rendering. There. Now I have a nice orange brown. The wall is a yellow brick. I mean, not yellow. What am I saying? The wall is red brick. And some of the sidewalks are also red brick. It's a little bit dark, but yeah, I think I want to make it a little brighter. A little bit more yellow and a little bit more orange red. That's a little dark too. I'm going to blot it up in just a second. Hopefully before it dries too much, so I can get a lot of that up. Boom, boom. That's a little dark. I'll add some water to that well. All right. I can lighten that if I think it's worth it. I can lighten that later. There we go. That's the color I want. And of course, the wall. This wall is part of the project that my client is building for the customer. So I will come back both with watercolor and with gouache, and maybe even with a little bit more pen and ink, and make sure that the wall looks really good, and that I will make sure that it's very dimensional, you know, that the shade and so on, the highlights and shade will show up really well, because we want the wall to look good. That's actually part of the proposed project, is building this wall. So the client wants to see a picture of it. And yeah, while I'm here, I am going to try to lighten this wall. Got a little bit dark. So this is a damp, clean brush with just water on it. Re-wetted that. That didn't have much effect, so let me do it again. If this was a formal watercolor and I really wanted it to get lighter, I do have other tricks up my sleeve, like, but this is more than adequate right now. Other tricks up my sleeve, like Mr. Clean Magic Eraser, which is actually a household cleaning product that does wonders for removing watercolor from a watercolor painting to make it lighter. And that is definitely a, well, lifting watercolors is a tried and true ancient technique. Using a Mr. Clean Magic Eraser is a bit of a new twist on watercolor technique. All right, I'm going to keep using this 1/2-inch brush now. I'm finding it more comfortable than the small one. One of the last things that I will do on this illustration is flowers, and I do that almost entirely with gouache. So I'll mix up some bright yellow, bright lavender, light blue, whatever, blue, red, lavender, yellow gouache, and try not to overdo it. It's so much fun to do dots of color. Anything that's a lot of fun as an artist, you have to watch out that you don't do too much of it. It's easy to get carried away just because it's so much fun. So as you can see, I'm getting there fairly rapidly. It's a big part of the business as a professional artist, is you don't have the luxury, if you want to make money as an artist, you just don't have the luxury of spending hours and hours and hours getting something perfect. It's got to be done quickly. And the same, by the way, the same is really true just as much in the fine art world. Now, if your paintings demand prices in the tens of thousands, then of course you could probably take a lot more time. My paintings, most of the big ones do, but my ordinary paintings do not go for tens. So I have to work with a degree of dispatch, shall we say. We shall say. We shall. Okay, the last bit of brown I have to do is the sidewalk itself, and they may be exactly the same color. I am inclined to think they are. Excuse me. Ooh, bless me. But I'm going to try to make this sidewalk just a slightly different, slightly more bright orange than the wall, so that there's a little bit of distinction between the two. Again, I'm modeling at the moment a pretty good example of this rule. Use the biggest brush you can stand. Use the biggest brush you can get away with. And I was able to do that whole sidewalk with a single stroke because I'm using the exact size of the brush. I'll get those blobs here in a minute. All right, continue to follow this strategy of starting large and work small. I'm all the way down to now painting individual bushes. And I'm going to clean up a well here with a tissue, with a Kleenex, so that I can mix up a brighter green color. There we go. Now, bushes. A lot of green, right? Just a lot of bushes are normally, except for the Japanese maple over here, which those of you who know about Japanese maples, of course, that will be red. It's a red tree. It's certainly not native to North Carolina. I believe it's native to, it's one of those easy Jeopardy questions. Where do Japanese maple trees come from? So if you remember, I've already done some shading on most of these bushes, so that now that I hit the whole bush or tree in this case with green, we already have some dimensionality. The light, you can see easily, is coming from the right. So the trees here have a dimensional, rounded, the trees and the bushes have a dimensional, rounded feeling to them, which gives just a little bit of a degree of realism. Thanks for joining me today. There's 3 of you, 4 of you. If you are watching, if you like it, if you do like it, please give me a thumbs up. I always forget to say that. I'm terrible at self-promotion, honestly. So thank you. If you enjoy this, if you don't, just keep it to yourself. I promised that it would be pretty boring, and I think I've fulfilled that promise. You know, it's not every day you get to watch somebody. You could force yourself to watch somebody do an entire illustration, almost from start to finish. And that is indeed what I'm doing here. I will know how long the illustration has taken me when I finish the live video and look at the time on YouTube. Oh, 2 hours. And of course, this does not make for great viewership. That people don't sign up in droves to watch a channel that has 2-hour videos. You have to be a little bit off. So I do wonder about you people that are watching. We're a little bit off together. That's the comforting part. All right, while I'm doing bushes, let's go ahead and get this Japanese maple nailed out. At different times of the year, it's different degrees of red. It's a dull red, burgundy maroon at some times, and then a more brilliant red, I think, in the springtime. Yeah. Anyway, that's that. There's some things that I'm beginning to see now. I am not happy with not the texture in that roof. I'm not happy with the color in it. So back over here to my paint tray, I'm gonna mix up a darker gray, or another dark. It doesn't have to be darker than the original. I just need to put another layer of dark on that roof. This happens a lot. You take your best guess at what value an object should be in a painting, and that as the painting develops, you realize, oh, that should be darker. Oh, and I haven't done the red brick chimney yet, so that's a fairly large chunk of color that needs to be done here. And once again, I still have a whole layer of gouache to go. Don't you love that word? Gouache. I still have a whole layer of gouache to go. And, oh, I hadn't mentioned this, but I guess I assumed that you knew it, but maybe you don't. The gouache is entirely a lightening agent. I use it to get lighter colors, not darker. If I want something darker in watercolor, and now the light side of that roof needs to be darker as well, so that's good. If I want something darker, I use traditional watercolor, and certainly I can go back and forth. Just because I switch to gouache doesn't mean I can't come back, of course, to watercolor. And if I want to do a really good job, a more accurate, a more realistic job, then I actually would be doing that a fair amount. I'll go back and forth. And also, if I want this to have a more finished, realistic, accurate appearance, I will also actually go back and use ink, the ink pen again, in the later stages, and I'll do ink lines literally on top of the gouache, which creates a nice effect. There's this little roof right there. There's a bit of green that I missed by the stairs here. I've got dark green on my brush right now, and I'm just going back and doing a little bit more of the shading on any of these bushes. Okay, this might be a good size of brush. No, let me show you another trick. By the way, let me take you on a ride real quick. Here's my brushes. Anyway, hello, this is my face. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dan. And I'm an artist. I'm also an illustrator, if you want to try to... Both of those are artists, of course. I do fine art most of the time these days. But when the occasion calls for it, I do illustrations. People need illustrations, so I'm helping them out, and it pays the bills, so it's helping me out. This is definitely paid work. I'm not doing this just for fun. As fun and jolly as it is. I don't do it for nothing. All right, now what I'm doing right now is I have not a watercolor brush at all, but a natural bristle oil painting brush, basically. A natural hog hair bristle brush that I have cut short with scissors so that it is quite stiff. And the stiffness of it makes it especially effective in lifting up, because it's like a little bristle brush, right? And it's more effective at lifting out. In fact, what's happening actually while I do this, I don't know if you can see this, it's actually lifting out the ink lines as well, but that's not a problem. I can easily come back and redraw those lines, which I will do after this dries. So this is a little trick that if any of you ever, and all of these tricks can be used in fine art painting as well. Usually you just have to be a little careful in fine arts that you don't use visual cliches too much. But as an illustrator, we specialize in visual cliches. But I want to show you that on the light side of the house, the walls are light, the windows are dark. On the dark side of the house, the windows are light and the walls are dark. Now, it doesn't have the effect I like, because I've wiped out the mullions, but you will see as I finish it up, that will be rectified in pretty short order. It won't be too hard to fix that. I'm going back here to the brown side of my palette because I have missed the chimney. Yeah, that's probably all right. Now, I'm getting close to gouache time. But forgive me, I'm going to make a bad noise for just a minute. I'm going to dry because I want to draw the lines back in those windows. Oh, wait. Hang on. I just remembered that this front door here is all nice stained brown wood. And while I'm at it, you can join me in looking at the photograph. Let's see if there's any other brown in this house. No, I don't think so. Just that front door. There's the front door. Yeah, there's a wreath on it. That's nice. Maybe I'll add that. All right. Let me try this for a second. All right, back to my pen now. I want to clean up these windows in particular. And I'll be ready to go to gouache in just a minute. Time-wise, I would guess I'm about 80% finished. Well, not counting the sketching time. If I count the sketching time, I'm 95% done, I guess. But as far as how much, so I'm coming along, getting close to finished. Yahoo! That's always exciting. And I'm about to go to gouache. There were many years ago when I was an art student, I didn't know how that word was pronounced. G-A-O-U, G-O-U. Now I can't remember how it's spelled. Gouache. Gouache. I wasn't sure how it was pronounced, so that kept me from buying it for a long time. Once I realized that was the reason for my reticence, then I quickly said, well, that's dumb, and bought it anyway. But it is called gouache. Kind of a strange word. All right, I'm getting carried away here with a pen. I don't want to do that. Yep, let's graduate to gouache. With my watercolor tray out of the way. And I know you can't quite see the whole thing here, but you can get the general idea. So, in both watercolor and gouache, I guess I'll pick this up and get my painting out of the way so I don't spray it. You don't clean your tray ever, pretty much. You just allow them to dry right wherever you left off the last time, because chances are really good that whatever you were doing last time, you'll use a bunch of those same colors. And you can see I have the lid of this is over there and has mostly greens on it, but gray, brown, green, red, yellow, purple, blue, blah, 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 and light stuff mostly in the middle. So it all is reactivated, of course. You know that. I know I don't need to tell you that, just to be clear. And now, I'm trying to decide, once again, where to start. I might do this later. I might come back and do some slight blue up here as if to suggest sky, but I might not, so I'll leave that for right now. I'm doing a lot of thinking, aren't I? Another trick up my sleeve as soon as I find it. That's funny. I had it here this yesterday. Here it is. I use a whiteout pen quite a bit. Let me show you what I'm doing here. This is Presto is the brand, the name brand. It's not a art product. It is a office supply store product. And if you ever want to buy some whiteout, I strongly recommend this brand, mostly because of you have to squeeze it to make it work, and the shape of this makes it much easier to squeeze than the ones that are shaped like a pen, like round. It is not a precise tool. It's a blunt tool. And even though I just made some pretty fine lines right there, you cannot, it's an imprecise tool. The reason I like it is because it really is, it's a very opaque white, very intense white, and really makes, sometimes I do this after the gouache. As you can see today, for some reason, I'm doing it before the gouache. So it's very opaque and very white and really pops, as I said. And sometimes that's a really nice effect in a quick watercolor sketch. Which is basically what I would call this. I would call this whole thing a watercolor sketch. I certainly wouldn't call it a watercolor painting. Call it a watercolor rendering, watercolor drawing, or watercolor sketch. And again, I realized earlier that I did this window a little bit wrong when I drew it in ink, but I'm going to fix it right now. There's a heavy mullion along the top. Again, the mullion is the. Let's look at the picture I've got of that again. There it is, right there. Okay, and then skinny mullions down here. So see if I can suggest skinny ones. Yep. There we go. So as you can see, this whiteout pen, can you see what I mean by pop? Really makes the image stark. It cleans it up a good bit. So it's a favorite tool of mine, and I have actually used this whiteout tool, whiteout pen, in formal or fine arts watercolor paintings in the past. If you handle it just right, it actually works quite well. Again, it's a very bright, very opaque, so it really jumps out. But I've achieved a few very, very nice little watercolor paintings using this whiteout pen. Again, it's not an art product. It is very much a office supply product. Trying to decide how to do the mullions on the shady side of the house. Yeah, no, I'm not going to use. Will not use this. I'll keep the white, this white to the bright side of this house. I will do these mullions on the shady side of the house. I'll do that with white, off-white gouache. Not quite so bright as this. And I am going to use this here to clean up this sidewalk, though. I will probably also use this whiteout for some white flowers, but I think I'm going to save that until after I do the gouache. Again, because I don't want to overdo. I don't want to make the flowers, jump out too much. And I won't really know how much is too much until after I've done the gouache. But I do want to clean up this sidewalk a little bit. It's looking a little better. A little bit more up here on the porch. A little bit here on the chimney. I'm definitely going to green now. sort of trying to decide which green to go with. Yeah, I think I'll do some of the green grass. This will just allow me to do a little bit of texture in the grass. You can hear me mixing it up over here. Now, gouache, not grass, gouache is quite tricky because it shifts color quite a bit when it's drying. It goes from light, most of the colors go from light to dark as they dry. And it's always a little bit of a guessing game. See, that's dark, and I don't want that dark. So I'm going to come back with a lighter gouache on top of it and see if I can get that to get lighter. Although I'm not going to try to erase what I just did. I'm going to use it to my advantage to create interesting texture. And in that regard, right at the moment, I'm acting more like a fine artist right now than an illustrator, because I'm concerned more about the abstract appearance of this space more than realism per se. I want it to look like grass, but I want it to look interesting as well as looking like grass. I want it to look like nice grass. Okay, I think that's drawing just about the right color. Get a little bit more white to it. And of course, the gouache, unlike the watercolor that dries variegated, it has a texture as it dries. The watercolor does. The gouache dries very flat, like paint you use to paint the walls of your house, right? The idea when you paint the walls in your house, you're trusting the can of paint. You're trusting that when it dries, it's all one color, right? And that's very much the way gouache is. It's, as it dries, whatever you've mixed up, it's all one flat color. So I'm actually using that property right now in this grass area to diminish the texture of the grass. And ironically, here in a few minutes after that dries, I am going to come back with the pen and draw lines on top of this gouache, which is a cool trick, by the way. If you the gouache has quite a different, as it dries, has quite a different feeling or texture from watercolor, and so it can be a little bit disconcerting to do what I'm doing here, to use both gouache and watercolor and gouache in the same painting, because they don't quite match up. Am I making sense to you? They don't quite look the same, so it takes on a bit of a haphazard mixed media look. But one of the tricks is, because this drawing was first done in pen and ink, I've been mixing up another colored green, by the way, that I want to start putting on the sunny side of the bushes. So one of the tricks is that I will come back with pen and ink again. I'm saying pen and ink, but I just mean with this pen. And I will do lines on top of the gouache. That goes a long way to making the gouache and the watercolor copacetic, feel like they go together. Because, of course, the gouache is very opaque and the watercolor is very transparent. So they have a very different look from each other. But if I come back, as you'll see in a few minutes, if I come back with a pen, black line, very carefully, not too much, not too little, just the right amount of black line on top of like this grass. It will make the gouache look a lot more like watercolor. And it just looks nice. So there you go. Whatever looks nice is, we're in favor of it. There, those bushes look pretty good. Now they have life. They have a roundedness, right? You can tell which way the light is coming from the upper right, and the shady side is the lower left. So I'm going to do a bunch of that. So much of being an artist is just enduring boredom. What's the word I'm looking for? Tedium. So much of being an artist is being willing to do what I've done this morning. Sit here. Of course, having a video going is part of my trick and strategy, you know. If I didn't have this video going, I promise I would have taken a lot more breaks in the last 2 hours than I have. But because the camera's on, I feel obligated to sit here and keep working. So it's actually forcing me to be more efficient. Isn't that funny? So I'm actually using you. Yes, you knew it. You had a suspicion all along, didn't you? I'm really just using you guys. One thing you want to watch out for when you're doing anything is don't use the same color everywhere. Like I don't want to use the same color, pale green, on all the different trees because I'm missing an opportunity. So I'm changing the color of my brush now to a bluish green, because evergreen trees, generally speaking, they tend to have a little bit more bluish cast than deciduous trees, right? And even if that's not true, I'm not a horticulturalist, I'm an artist. That is generally true, but even if it's not true of whatever tree that is, and I forget now. He told me, and this looks like them, but I forget now what they're called. It's not columnar juniper. But anyway, the putting a different color, I don't know if you guys can see that. I think you can. Yeah, you can discern. I'm putting a bluish green gouache, bluish green gouache on these trees. And the fact that they're a different color than the highlight I did on these bushes is very pleasant. So now that I've got this color on my brushes, I'll go throughout all the bushes and do some of them blue-green and some of them yellow-green. You're beginning to see really what the finished painting is going to look like when you look at these bushes. Quite a bit more realistic than it was for relatively little effort. They are considerably more realistic after I do the gouache. And of course, a number of these bushes are going to get flowers as well. That's as working for working for a landscape designer. Generally speaking, we want to put our best foot forward, so to speak, and we want the the landscaping to be very happy colored, right? So we'll have a lot of bushes in bloom, even if they don't all bloom at the same time of the year. By the way, I just remembered, he told me one of these, somewhere on here it says hydrangeas. Oh yeah, over there. Okay. So all of a sudden, these bushes back here, I forgot, they just became hydrangeas, which means I'm going to use this blue-green paint to to do the hydrangea flowers, which are big round things. And I'll add white to that later on. But let's continue. I'm going to do all the bushes that need doing with this blue-green color. I might do some of this. I will do some of this up there in the background trees as well. Now all these bushes are in the shade, so I'm trying to decide, do I worry about it too much? Yeah, I do a little bit. Okay, enough of that color for now. Let's go back to the yellowish green for more highlights. Let me see how my batteries are doing. I guess we're okay. Forgive me, I stand up for just a second and plug in my iPad because I have one battery getting low. All right, I think that's okay. How's my other battery doing? Doing great. All right. Major disaster narrowly averted. Now, a medium green on this brush. That's pretty, I say to myself with mild amazement. Like, ooh, that looks nice. By the way, that is a good description of what it's like. If you're an artist, you will resonate with what I'm about to say. If you're not an artist, you'll go, huh, I didn't know that's what it was like to be an artist. All right, so here's how it feels very often to be an artist. You're going along, painting or drawing, or whatever you're doing, painting, drawing, making, and you have an idea, and you say to yourself, huh, I think it will look good if I do blank, if I do thus and so. And what I just did was, with a particular color green, this is not the same green that I was doing these bushes. It's a more intense green and a little bit darker. Anyway, I says to myself, huh, I think it might look good if I do this color in this way, with these kind of movements, with these kind of motions, this kind of brushstroke. I think it will look good if I do that. That's what you do as an artist. You take educated guesses, because you don't really know what it's going to look like till after you do it. I think many non-artists might be surprised to know that that is the case. Now, if I'm talking to artists, let me use this as a teaching point. If you always know exactly what everything's going to look like before you do it, then you, my friend, are stuck in a mighty rut. You need to add some creativity. You've lost the adventure, you've lost the creativity in your craft. If you always know, and I'm being a little bit facetious here, because I really can hardly imagine an artist that always knows exactly what everything's going to look like before he or she does it. But anyway, back to my original. So we, as artists, we go, huh, I think it'll look good if I do thus and so, this and that, and so on and so on and so forth. Make this kind of mark with this kind of tool and this kind of color and this kind of texture and so on. And then we do it, and after we do, we go, huh, We have one of two responses. It's either like, eh. Oh, it's either, well, not two responses, a range of responses, okay? We go, oh, crap. Oh, darn it. That didn't look as good as I was hoping it would. And a bunch of artists listening right now, if there's a bunch of artists, they're going, amen, that's exactly right. We've all had that experience, like, oh, I was really hoping that would have a lot better effect. And then there's other times you do it, like you just heard me do it a while ago. That's what brought this up. We do something, and after it's done, we go, oh, yahoo! That worked really well. That looks really good. And then, of course, you sort of file that away in your artist memory and say, ooh, I'll do something like that again, which you do. But, of course, you don't want to do it too much, because if you do, you get sameness and boredom. Anyway, that's another subject. I won't get into it right now. But anyway, that's very much what it's like as an artist. You take a guess, you think, I think it'll look good if I do this. Then you do it, and then after you do it, you go, either, oh, that's terrible, or it's okay. It's pretty good, or wow, that really looks really good. Does that make sense? Again, I say all that because I think probably most non-artists would be a little surprised, because I think they non-artists think we know what we're doing all the time. And yet you want to strike a balance, by the way. I'll go this far into the creativity. Since I'm on the subject here, I'll do a quick lesson on what I call the creativity donut. The creativity donut. If you do too much creativity and you're just all over the map, most college art students are like this. They're wild and crazy. Woo-hoo! No holds barred. Yeah. Glue a dead rat to the canvas. Yeah. And, and then encase it in caustic, encase it in fiberglass and go groovy. That's creativity. It's just like, I'll represent that by wild hands going, wee-haw. Here's artist hands going, wee-haw. This is too much creativity. You don't get enough maturity and growth and excellence and carefulness. On the other hand, if you're in here and everything you do all the time is exactly what you already know how to do, then you're stuck and you're repetitive. Your paintings get boring because you're not doing enough creativity. Too much, not enough. The sweet spot, as you can see, is the donut here in the middle. Some creativity, some predictability. You know exactly what's going to happen to a degree, but you're still experimenting. So that's the creativity donut. And as an artist, that's where you want to live. Golly gee, wasn't that exciting? Worth the price of admission right there if you're an artist. Yeah, you had to put up with 2.5 hours of blathering before you got to that part. But anyway, such is life on Dan Nelson's YouTube channel.